At a friend's gathering, Ashley Hood, that girl bro of my boyfriend, draped her arm over my shoulder in a mock display of camaraderie. She opened her mouth and asked, "Tanya, I heard you're mixed race? What kind of mongrel are you?" As soon as she said this, everyone in the room burst into laughter, praising her for being so witty. She swayed the bottle in her hand smugly, nodding her head as she said, "These days, if an animal is a mixed breed, they are no longer valuable." Without changing my expression, I swiftly turned and slapped her hard across the face. Then, with a sweet smile, I asked her, "So, how much does a purebred animal like you charge for a night?" Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. It wasn't until I returned to this country that I first heard about Ashley Hood, the childhood friend of Dylan Lynch, my boyfriend of 3 years. Apparently, she was the darling princess of their group. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was normal for a group of 7 or 8 lads to be extra attentive to a delicate girl they grew up with. So when I came back, I even prepared a gift for this Ashley. After all, if I was going to marry Dylan, I'd have to integrate into his social circle and meet his friends. Humans are social creatures, aren't we? Everyone has their own little group. However, I never imagined that Dylan and I would have a complete falling out the first time he took me to drink with his bros at the pub. In my mind, their girl bro should have been a tomboy with a lively personality and a pretty face. But when I first met her, the stark contrast almost shattered my perception. First off, this girl bro was wearing a white shirt with the top 2 buttons undone. A large patch of skin on her chest was exposed, with half of her cleavage visible, wrapped in suggestive lace. Her body-hugging mini skirt was scandalously short. Her movements were exaggerated, boisterous, and uninhibited. I'm not prejudiced against her, but honestly, several times when she carelessly lifted her leg, the view under her skirt was almost completely exposed. To be honest, many girls who wear such short skirts would wear leggings underneath, to avoid embarrassment, just in case. But Ashley didn't. Not only did she not wear leggings, she was only wearing a semi-transparent black thing underneath. They started playing a game of truth or dare. I'd never played before and didn't know the rules, so I just sat quietly to the side, watching them play wildly. Ashley lost several rounds in a row and had to do a dare. The punishment was to choose between drinking or taking off a piece of clothing. Without hesitation, she chose the latter. The next second, that white shirt was off and thrown directly onto my boyfriend Dylan's head. That jerk actually instinctively picked up the shirt and sniffed it. Then, like an obedient puppy, he folded it neatly and set it aside. At this point, Ashley was left wearing only a semi-transparent black lace bra, with her reddish-black cherries peeking through the lace. This sight made several of the men present unable to help swallowing hard. I stood up, poured myself a drink, then took out my phone and sent Dylan a message. "Dylan, I'm getting a bit tired. Shall we head off?" I really couldn't stand to watch this scene any longer. I was even thinking that I should advise Dylan later that childhood female friends eventually grow up, and there should be boundaries between men and women. He should be mindful of the influence. After all, Ashley would get married someday too. I didn't say I wanted to leave out loud, but chose to text him instead. When we're out, especially in front of Dylan's childhood mates, I always try to be considerate of his image. But what happened next left me stunned, my brain even feeling a bit oxygen deprived. In the next round, Dylan was the loser. His punishment was to choose a girl in the room and leave a hickey on her chest. For some reason, I felt that this drinking game had taken on an unsavory tone. I had just sent him a message, which he had clearly seen but pretended not to notice, giving no response. At this moment, he picked up his glass, seemingly intending to accept the forfeit and drink. But Ashley beat him to it, plunking herself down on his lap and throwing her arms around his neck. She shouted loudly, "What's the matter with you? Got a girlfriend and forgot about your bro? It's just a hickey, isn't it? Come on, let me give you one." The private room erupted in laughter once again. Dylan's mates all chimed in with their 2 cents. "Ash, give Dylan a break. His girlfriend's right here. Yeah, knock it off, another friend said, reaching out to pull Ashley away. But Ashley, with reddened eyes and pouting lips, shouted, "It's just a bit of fun, what's the problem?" She turned to Dylan, thrusting at her chest. "Dylan, want to give me a hickey?" As she spoke, her ample D-cup breasts were shoved right in Dylan's face, pressing tightly against him. The tips of Dylan's ears turned bright red. And then he latched onto that soft, tender flesh with his mouth. Ashley tilted her head back in satisfaction, making little noises as if she was thoroughly enjoying it. When Dylan finally released her, that patch of once pale skin now bore a glaring red mark. Everyone in the room laughed suggestively. Perhaps it was because of my presence that the atmosphere felt somewhat awkward. I was seething with anger inside, feeling utterly wretched. I told myself to hold it together, to wait until we left before having it out with Dylan. But Ashley's next move caught me completely off guard. She reached down and gave Dylan's crotch a firm squeeze. Then, giggling, she said, "You naughty boy, getting excited again, are you?" In an instant, Dylan's face turned bright red. And when he looked at me, his gaze was full of evasion. Ashley, however, acted as if nothing had happened. She spun around and sidled up to me, leaning in to say, "Tanya, you're not angry, are you?" I was about to get up and go outside for some air. This scene was just too much to bear. Moreover, I started to seriously consider a question. Were Dylan and I really right for each other? In fact, my parents at home had already expressed some reservations about Dylan. The Lynch family had been on a downward slope for years, and their family business was in desperate need of fresh blood. My mother had mentioned these things to me privately before, but for several reasons, I hadn't taken it to heart. Firstly, our families had been close for years, and the elders had even jokingly arranged a marriage between us when we were children. Secondly, Dylan was undeniably handsome, perfectly matching my aesthetic preferences. Thirdly, I had always stubbornly believed that Dylan was an honest, gentle, and refined man. But today, he had utterly disappointed me. "Tanya, let me tell you, Dylan and I go way back," Ashley said with a laugh. "When he was a child, he used to spread his legs and let me touch him, asking if he'd grown bigger yet." I remained expressionless, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, only brushing her hand off my shoulder. She seemed a bit displeased and asked again, "Tanya, what was your full name again?" "Tanya Lawrence? I heard you're mixed race. What kind of mongrel are you?" A roar of laughter erupted in the private room. I've got to hand it to our Ash, she's hilarious. Mixed race, isn't that just a mongrel? I looked up, my gaze falling coldly on Dylan. I noticed that he was laughing too. Was this really so funny? Ashley, seeing that she had an audience, became even more smug. With one hand holding a bottle and the other on her hip, she shook her head and said, "These days, when animals mix breeds, they lose their value." The crowd once again burst into jarring laughter. Smack! I slapped her hard across the face. The crisp sound of the slap echoed throughout the private room. Ashley staggered back several steps, clutching her instantly reddened cheek, and shrieked, You dare to hit me?" "I hit you because you're a purebred animal," I retorted directly. "How much are you worth? How much per night?" Before the words had even left my mouth, I lunged forward, grabbed her hair, and slapped her hard across the other cheek. Never in my life had I been so deeply humiliated. Whatever happened between Ashley, Dylan, and those other blokes when they were kids, kissing, touching bums, or whatever else, that's their business. I don't understand it, but I can choose to respect it. After all, I picked my boyfriend with my own poor judgment, so I can't blame others for that. But when they started insulting me to my face, I couldn't stand it for even a second. I had to roll up my sleeves and have a word with her. After I pinned her down and slapped her face about a dozen times, the others finally managed to pull me off her. But that bastard Dylan Lynch actually raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. Instantly, a metallic taste filled my mouth. My ears were ringing, and I could only hear muffled barking. "Tanya, have you gone mad? Can't you take a joke? And you call yourself a lady? Resorting to violence?" How are you any different from those common fishwives? Apologize, he shouted while carefully examining Ashley's face for injuries. The rest of the people in the private room all had smug looks on their faces, clearly enjoying the drama. This jerk actually hit a woman? I was surprised, but thinking about it, it seemed quite in character. So his usual gentlemanly and polite demeanor was all just an act. I'm the type with a relatively high level of acceptance, but I never let myself be taken advantage of. I grabbed a beer bottle from the nearby table and, without thinking, smashed it over Dylan's head. With a loud crash, the bottle shattered, and a trickle of blood slowly ran down Dylan's cheek. After a moment of shock, he pointed at me and roared, "Tanya, have you really gone mad? It's over! I'm breaking up with you." Touching my burning cheek, I suddenly laughed. "Fine by me," I said. I turned to leave. I couldn't fit into their dirty social circle, and I didn't want to. I didn't want Dylan anymore either. I just wanted to go home quickly, tell my mother everything, and have her immediately stop discussing cooperation and prenuptial agreements with the Lynch family. But just then, Ashley's shrill voice suddenly rang out behind me. "Don't let her leave! Andrew, lock the door! Don't let her out!" As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed my phone from the coffee table and smashed it violently on the ground. The phone flew far and shattered into pieces. "Dylan, you absolutely can't let her leave, and you can't break up with her." Ashley was still screaming. "Your two families are at a crucial point in negotiations. How can you let some silly girl ruin everything? We absolutely cannot let her go out and spread rumors about what happened here today. Dylan, when a woman misbehaves, you need to beat her until she submits." I couldn't believe my ears. Is this something an educated modern woman would say? Before I could finish that thought, Ashley's venomous voice rang out again. "Dylan, you're so useless. Getting hit by a misbehaving woman? She dared to hit me. Today, I'll make sure she pays the price." I was curious to hear how she planned to make me pay. "You five, take turns with her. I'll record it." Ashley's eyes flashed with snake-like hatred as she said through gritted teeth, "I want to see how this woman dares to act high and mighty in front of me after I have this video. Besides, with this video, your Lynch family can negotiate business deals however you want, can't they? Does she dare go to the police? She's the Lawrence family's precious daughter. If this gets out, how will she ever show her face in public again? The best way to deal with women like her is to shame them as sluts, so they can never hold their heads up again." A wave of indescribable panic, like a cold, venomous snake, began to crawl up from the depths of my heart. What kind of beasts were these men, to say such things? The man called Andrew had already positioned himself in front of the pub's private room door. This was a pub, and like all pubs, the music in the corridor outside was deafening. Once the door to the private room was closed, even if all hell broke loose inside, people outside wouldn't hear a thing. Even if you screamed your lungs out, others would just assume you were letting loose and having fun. They'd never imagine that a crime was taking place in here. As soon as Ashley finished speaking, an oily voice chuckled. "I'm just worried Dylan might not be willing to share. I've never tasted the flavor of mixed race before, bro. Dylan, you go first. We'll back you up." Dylan stared at me intently, stepping closer and closer. Then, he started to unbuckle his belt. "Tanya, don't blame me," he said, his gaze suddenly turning vicious. His voice filled with a chilling coldness. "If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not knowing your place. Ashley was just joking with you, but you had to go and hit her, causing a scene. Today, if we don't teach you a lesson, who knows how high you'll fly in the future?" Heh heh. A low, hoarse growl escaped his throat, like that of a hungry wolf. 5 men, plus Ashley who was acting like a lunatic, made 6 people in total. And I was alone, empty-handed. But I've never been one to accept fate lying down. Just as Dylan was sneering and inching closer to me, I suddenly reached out and grabbed another beer bottle from the table. Crash! The beer bottle shattered in my hand. Without a moment's hesitation, I gripped the jagged half of the bottle and thrust it towards Dylan's abdomen. When I lived abroad, the environment wasn't exactly safe. So I had learned some basic self-defense. My combat instructor had said that women are naturally at a physical disadvantage compared to men. This is an inherent weakness that can't be changed. So, the only way to win is to strike unexpectedly, attack where they're not prepared. In martial arts, speed is supreme. Dylan probably never expected my move to be as swift as lightning. He staggered backwards, clutching his abdomen in pain, letting out a muffled groan. Blood began seeping through his fingers. At the sight of blood, everyone in the room seemed to freeze. I even caught a fleeting glimpse of fear in their eyes. Ashley, however, started screaming like a madwoman. "What are you waiting for? Get her together! Grab her! Strip her!" I shouted fiercely, "Who dares? Right now, this is at most a drunken brawl after an argument. But if you dare to lay a hand on me, that's a crime. This is a private matter between Dylan and me. It has nothing to do with any of you. You all have families and homes. Think carefully about whether it's worth ruining your lives over someone else's business." The remaining 4 men's faces clearly showed signs of hesitation. I knew that if I were just a powerless orphan girl, they would have no qualms about what they were about to do today. They would abuse me without a second thought. But behind me stood the Lawrence family. Abusing me meant facing the wrath of the entire Lawrence family in the future. Ashley was still shouting, unwilling to give up. "What are you afraid of? As long as we get a video of her acting like a slut, she'll have to do whatever we say from now on. We can make her do anything we want." Mustering all my strength, I hurled the remaining broken bottle at her head. She screamed in terror, covering her head. I seized the opportunity to grab all the bottles on the table and threw them at the men one after another. In an instant, the entire room was in chaos. Glass shards flew everywhere, amidst curses and screams. "Shut up, all of you!" Taking advantage of the confusion, I grabbed Ashley by the hair, yanking her in front of me. I pressed the sharp edge of a glass shard against her throat. By the time Dylan had finally caught his breath from the intense pain, I had successfully taken a hostage. "Open the door!" My voice was hoarse but couldn't mask the bloodthirst and violence emanating from my very core. "Otherwise, we'll all die here today." As I spoke, the glass shard in my hand had already cut into the skin on Ashley's neck. Just then, I suddenly felt my body go weak. An uncontrollable heat surging from deep within me as desire rose uncontrollably. Though I had Ashley in my grasp, she seemed to have gone completely mad, still shouting, "Dylan!" I spiked her drink. She won't last much longer. My mind was in chaos, with only one thought remaining. Lunatics, they're all lunatics. The burning sensation in my body grew more intense, and my hand holding the glass shard began to tremble slightly. Dylan looked at me, his expression terrifyingly dark. The blood on his forehead had congealed, but the wound on his abdomen was still seeping blood. With even the slightest movement, fresh blood would seep through again. He pressed hard on his abdomen, enduring the pain, and said, "Tanya, put down the glass, kneel down and apologize to Ashley. Then we can put this behind us. Otherwise..." His gaze turned vicious as he spoke each word deliberately. "Don't blame us. If you must blame someone, blame yourself for not knowing your place. Ashley was just playing a joke on you, that's all." I pressed the glass shard deeper against Ashley's carotid artery with all my might. My voice hoarse as I retorted, "Damn it. Apologize? In your dreams. Dylan. If you like this purebred animal so much, why don't you two just be together? Why did you have to come after me?" Dylan opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. "Dylan, what are you waiting for? You coward. Can't you even subdue one woman?" Ashley was still desperately trying to provoke him. "Do you want her to walk all over you for the rest of your life?" Hearing this, Dylan actually reached out his hand towards my head. I shoved Ashley towards him with all my strength. Already injured, he had to make a sudden movement to catch Ashley, causing the wound on his abdomen to tear open with searing pain, blood gushing out. "Dylan, are you going to do it or not?" If not, let me have a go. Jack's sleazy voice sounded again. Haha, this mixed race got some fire in her. I like it, he said, actually reaching out to grab my hair. Without hesitation, I swung my fist, smashing it into his eye socket. 1 punch. 2 punches. 3 punches. My teacher was right, in martial arts, speed is everything. But that damned drug was making me feel worse and worse. My hands and feet were already becoming unsteady. If I stayed here any longer, I'd be dead for sure. After all that commotion, I was already close to the door. Using my last ounce of strength, I charged towards the main entrance. Ashley's shrill voice still rang out behind me. Andrew! Stop her! Don't let her get away. The one called Andrew was a man wearing gold-rimmed glasses, who looked refined and cultured. Just as I was about to punch him, he suddenly stepped aside and quickly reached out to open the door. Miss Lawrence, run. As I stepped out the door, I felt my legs give way, nearly falling to the ground. The door behind me slammed shut with a bang. I could hear Ashley's furious roar from inside. Andrew, are you mad? Why did you let her go? Don't you know what? It can't be worse than it is now. Andrew's voice, however, sounded unusually calm. Dylan, you're such a coward. Don't you know the weight of your family's responsibilities rests on your shoulders? That Miss Lawrence isn't just an ordinary girl. How could you think she'd let you manipulate her with such underhanded tactics? Dylan! She just can't stand to see you do well. Andrew's laughter came through, tinged with a hint of bewilderment and an undisguisable sense of loss. My heart was racing faster and faster, as if a raging fire was burning inside me. I gripped the glass shard tightly, letting its sharp edge dig deep into my palm. The intense pain helped me maintain a sliver of consciousness. I stumbled out, thankfully finding a few Uber drivers waiting for fares at the pub entrance. In the hospital's emergency room, I borrowed a nurse's phone to call my brother. Soon, David rushed over in a flurry. As soon as I saw him, I couldn't hold back anymore and cried my eyes out while hugging him. When I had cried enough, the doctor in a white coat frowned and called my brother aside to talk. In the future, advise your sister not to go to those dodgy places anymore. The drug she took was a very heavy dose. Although the hospital has serum to counteract it, one wrong move could damage her brain's nervous system. After the doctor left, David pulled up a chair and sat down by my bed. Looking at the wounds all over my body, he asked with concern, Tanya, what exactly happened? Weren't you out with Dylan? How did you end up in this state? I thought for a moment, then recounted the events in detail. After listening, David punched the wall in anger. I thought Dylan looked like a decent bloke and seemed quite reliable usually. How could he do such a beastly thing? I considered for a moment before asking softly, David, should we call the police? David leaned against the wall nearby, staying silent for a long while before slowly speaking. Tanya, reporting this to the police won't solve the fundamental problem. You hit them first, and Dylan and that woman are more severely injured than you. If we really call the police, it would be ruled as a mutual fight, and you might even have to bear the main responsibility. As for the drugging, if Dylan and his lot insist it was just a couple's game, we can't do anything about it either. David analyzed the situation for me point by point. That's right. I thought the same. Calling the police wouldn't ensure they receive the punishment they deserve. David was always calm and steady, but this time, his tone carried undisguised anger. No one has ever bullied a Lawrence like this before. Besides, I feel something's not quite right about this whole affair. I need to have someone investigate it thoroughly. I nodded and said softly, I'll do as you say, David. You focus on recovering first, David said as he stood up. In a few days, I'll arrange for you to go abroad. Don't worry about the business matters. I nodded, but tears started rolling down my cheeks again. My marriage was a small matter, but David had been negotiating business with the Lynch family for nearly half a year. The financial dealings between large companies are enormous, not to mention all the planning and countless hours of work put in. Now, because of what I said, all of this had to be cancelled. I'm sorry, I said in a low voice, but David patted my head. Tanya, what are you sorry for? It's fortunate that he showed his true colors before you got married. Otherwise, if he only revealed his fangs after you were married, we'd really be at a loss then. By that time, trying to get out of it wouldn't be so easy. David left, but he assigned 2 bodyguards to look after me at the hospital. When I woke up the next day, it was already noon. The summer sun was blazing, shining brightly through the hospital window. The hospital's air conditioning was set just right, neither too cold nor too hot. The effects of the drug had completely worn off, but I still felt weak all over, with my arms and legs aching terribly. David had someone bring me a new mobile phone. I had just turned it on and played with it for a bit when, suddenly, my phone erupted with a series of ding-dong notification sounds. It was messages from Dylan. "Tanya, where are you? I've been calling you and you're not picking up. I'm worried sick. Have you eaten?" His attitude was as if nothing had happened last night. I really didn't know what kind of mindset he had to be able to gloss over everything like this. "Tanya, are you all right? Yesterday, Ashley was just joking around." He started to casually mention yesterday's events. "You beat her up badly, and hit me too. I had to get several stitches on my head and stomach. Please apologize to her. I'm begging you. As long as you apologize, we can put this whole thing behind us." He kept sending messages, rambling on. I didn't block him, because this matter wasn't over. Forget about apologizing. Even if Ashley were to kneel down and kowtow to me in apology, I absolutely would not forgive her. "Put it behind us?" I coldly replied. "Dylan, do you really think this matter can just be over like that? What are you thinking?" Dylan's call came through quickly. I answered it. I was ready to lash out, looking for a place to vent my anger. Him calling was exactly what I wanted. As soon as the call connected, Dylan said, "Tanya, if you just apologize to Ashley, this whole thing will blow over. We've been together for 3 years. Don't you love me anymore? Can't you just put up with a little discomfort for my sake? Can't you see the bigger picture here?" His shameless words made me laugh bitterly. "Dylan, what kind of beast are you? Why should I put up with anything for you? A real man would protect his girlfriend when they're out, not stand by while she's insulted to her face. Do you think I could still respect you after that? You want me to just put up with it? You're only fit to dance with beasts." I must have been blind. With that, I hung up the phone. My body was covered in various scrapes and cuts from the broken glass. Over 100 in total, big and small. My forehead and face were also scratched up. Fortunately, none of the wounds were too deep, so they wouldn't leave scars. So, the next evening, I was discharged from hospital and went home. During this time, Dylan had tried calling to harass me, but I blocked his number. I felt there was no satisfaction in arguing with a beast. A man who could gather his mates to try and drug and gang rape his fiancée, even planning to film it, was truly worse than an animal. I directed the housekeeper to start packing my bags, preparing to go abroad to clear my head. But I never imagined Dylan would bring his grandmother, the Lynch family matriarch, directly to my door. The old woman narrowed her cunning eyes, dropping her usual kindly facade, and immediately demanded, "Tanya, I hear you want to call off the engagement?" Knowing her intentions, I replied bluntly, "Ms. Lynch, I don't want to call off the engagement. I want to dump Dylan." I still had enough respect for the elderly not to call Dylan a beast to her face. "Don't you think you owe us an explanation for injuring Dylan?" Ms. Lynch pressed aggressively. Her tone carried undisguised threats and coercion. "Tanya Lawrence, I know your family has money and influence, but your roots are all overseas. You don't know anyone of importance here in this country. Just based on Dylan and Ashley's injuries, I could have an assessment done and get you locked up for a few years. Listen to me, child. When it's time to bow your head, you bow your head. Go apologize to the hood girl, then start preparing for the wedding." Meanwhile, Dylan actually tried to take my hand, adding, "Tanya, just apologize. If you do, everything will be fine." I yanked my hand away, sneering, "Absolute why not? Dylan, go spend your life with that purebred beast." Ms. Lynch frowned, saying sternly, "Tanya, apologize, and I'll treat you like my own granddaughter from now on. Otherwise." Her threat was cut off by an icy voice. Otherwise what? It was my brother, entering with 2 assistants. Seeing him, Ms. Lynch's brow furrowed slightly, but she still gave a small bow, saying, "Mr. Lawrence, perfect timing. Please talk some sense into your foolish sister. Our families are at a critical stage of asset restructuring. There's no need to ruin everything over a small matter. A young lady should know how to see the big picture." My brother smiled, saying, "Ms. Lynch, your timing is perfect too. Saves me a trip." This marriage is off. No further discussion needed. As for what you said earlier about going to the police and pressing charges, my brother's gaze turned cold. You're welcome to try. As you said, my family has some connections abroad, and we all know security isn't great overseas. For families like ours, who doesn't keep a few desperate men on the payroll? At worst, I lose a few mercenaries. Wiping out your entire Lynch family wouldn't be too difficult. Ms. Lynch's face instantly turned ashen, her lips trembling, unable to utter a word. Seeing this, Dylan hurried to smooth things over. Mr. Lawrence, my grandmother was just worried and spoke hastily. Please don't take it to heart. Tanya and I just had a small argument. We've been together for 3 years after all. You know Tanya loves me. Really, if Tanya just apologizes, everything will be fine. I promise, I'll stay away from those people from now on. I'll take Tanya abroad to live. He stepped in front of me again, his tone almost begging as he said quietly, Tanya, please. I promise, if you just give in this once, I'll do whatever you say from now on. Tanya, I'm begging you. I'll get on my knees. With that, Dylan actually clutched his stomach wound and dropped to his knees in front of everyone with a thud. Ms. Lynch immediately interjected, attempting to guilt-trip me. Miss Lawrence, do you really need this old woman to kneel and beg before you'll let this go? I took a few steps back, distancing myself from Dylan, who was kneeling on the ground. Then, I spoke slowly and deliberately. Dylan, there's no chance for us anymore, and I absolutely will not apologize to anyone. If I were in the wrong, I would admit it. But has this world truly lost all sense of right and wrong? Dylan's face turned ashen, and Ms. Lynch's expression became extremely unpleasant. My brother, however, let out a chuckle. He looked down at Dylan kneeling on the ground, then casually sat down in a chair and said with a smirk, My dear sister, do you know why Dylan is so insistent on forcing you to apologize to Ashley? I shook my head. I had a feeling that there was something not quite right behind all of this. My brother smiled and turned his gaze to Ms. Lynch. Ms. Lynch, I know you're the true leader of the Lynch family. It's been 10 years, haven't you ever thought about completely resolving the root of this trouble? As he spoke, my brother waved to his assistant behind him. The assistant immediately understood and stepped forward to hand a thick stack of documents to Ms. Lynch. Ms. Lynch only opened and glanced at it briefly, but I noticed her aged hands had already begun to tremble uncontrollably. My brother sneered. If it weren't for what happened to Tanya, I naturally wouldn't have bothered to investigate all this messy business. In fact, in my eyes, this hardly even counts as a big deal. But you lot have allowed a mere girl to manipulate you for a whole decade? Your Lynch family, neither clean in your dealings nor decisive in your actions. When trouble arises, instead of solving the problem, you try to make my sister bear the brunt and take the fall for you? How could I, David Lawrence, possibly cooperate with such a family? Or let me put it another way. If I choose to let my sister suffer for the sake of such selfish people today, won't it be my turn to pay for your stupidity and incompetence in the future? My brother lit a cigarette, slowly exhaled the smoke, then continued languidly. Dylan, as the future leader of a great family, I'm not asking you to expand the family business. But isn't protecting one's parents, wife, and children the most basic principle of being a man? Just for daring to tell my sister to apologize, to suffer a little hardship with those words alone. This marriage alliance is absolutely off the table for the Lawrence family. That's my brother for you. Our father passed away when I was very young. Within the family business, uncles and cousins were eyeing it greedily, while external enemies surrounded us. My brother took charge in this crisis, always with an attitude of life and death mean nothing. If you're not satisfied, then bring it on. He carved out a path for our survival through a bloody storm. Now, having finally sorted out our overseas assets and preparing to return home to invest and develop, he encounters this vexing mess. I imagine the frustration in his heart must be even greater than mine. My brother called for the butler to show our guests out. Dylan looked at me pitifully, pleading, Tanya, just go. I don't want to see you ever again, I said resolutely. Ms. Lynch, you'd better resolve that trouble quickly. Otherwise, this sort of thing will happen again and again. My brother reminded her with a mocking tone. Remember, it wasn't anyone else who ruined our two families' cooperation and your grandson's marriage prospects. It was that girl from the Hood family. Heh, that precious darling you've doted on and raised since she was little. A flash of viciousness and overwhelming hatred crossed Ms. Lynch's face. Then, without a word, she supported Dylan and turned to leave. After they left, I frowned and asked, David, What's really going on here? My brother pointed to the copy of the documents on the table and said, "See for yourself. Tanya, over the years I've done all sorts of unsavory things in the struggle for power and profit. But this kind of unprovoked abuse and rape of a girl, how could anyone do such a thing? I refuse to associate with such people." I picked up the documents and started reading. After just a few pages, I couldn't help but curse angrily. Beasts! They're nothing but beasts. This whole affair goes back to when Andrew, the fifth Dawson's son, was in high school at about 17 years old. He fell for a girl in his class named Lucy. Andrew, the one who opened the door for me to leave that day in the private room, is the fifth Dawson's son. Back then, Andrew wrote love letters and sent flowers to the girl, pursuing her passionately. Coming from a wealthy family and being handsome and refined, the girl was quite fond of him too, so she accepted when he confessed his feelings. Andrew was overjoyed and brought Lucy, this girl he was dating, into their little group that had grown up together. At that time, they were all 16 or 17, just beginning to experience romance, with hormones far outweighing reason. Everyone was happy to have a gentle and lovely girl join their little group. So, at first, they all took good care of Lucy, but Ashley wasn't happy about it. She thought Lucy was nothing but a complete flirt, stealing away her childhood friends, and taking away her princess status as the group's darling. The documents don't clearly describe the exact process of what happened next. In any case, Ashley began to bully Lucy relentlessly. In her own words, she wanted to beat her into submission. Lucy tried to resist many times, but it was all useless. Later, Ashley got hold of some drugs from somewhere, and led by Jack, they gang raped Lucy. Ashley filmed the entire process. From then on, Ashley used this video to blackmail them. She not only beat Lucy at will, but also forced her to kneel, stripped her naked to film more videos, forced her to swallow glass, forced her to stay with snakes. In her words, this was punishment for a slut. In the end, they literally played with that girl until she died. A group of 17 and 18-year-old youths, after causing a death, were all panic-stricken. When Ms. Lynch learned of this, she hurriedly stepped in, spending money to pull strings and forcibly suppress the whole affair. But who could have imagined that? Ashley had secretly kept the video of them gang-raping Lucy. This became her capital over the years, allowing her to blackmail them and do whatever she wanted. Usually, they just hung out together, eating, drinking, and having fun, with no one mentioning the incident from years ago. But whenever any of these men were about to get married, their fiancés would invariably be tormented by Ashley until they were utterly exhausted. She would force the fiancés to kneel before her, to bow their heads to her, before she would let the matter rest. In any case, in their twisted little group, whenever a new girl joined, she had to first bow and kneel to Ashley before the matter could be considered settled. My brother leaned back in his chair and said coolly, "If it were anyone else, it wouldn't matter. But Dylan, it's different for her. Ashley fancies Dylan. She's always wanted to marry him, but she's not only had unclear relationships with every man in their little group, she's also been quite promiscuous outside of it. She even has an illegitimate child, which she dumped on the father. I didn't notice these things at first because she was always going about with that Jack Booth. I thought they were a couple. I reckon any man with half a brain wouldn't want to marry a woman like that, would they? But you don't know the half of it. She goes around calling herself a modern woman, always banging on about gender equality." I stammered. What kind of mind does she have to think like that? My brother waved his hand dismissively. "Tanya, let's talk about the important stuff. The Lynch family marriage is definitely off the table, but I've run into some difficulties on my end." As he spoke, he pulled out his phone from his pocket and sent me a message. "The Ford family's young master is quite handsome. Why don't you have a look at his photo? If you like what you see, maybe try to get to know him?" When my brother said this, there was a hint of caution in his voice. After he finished, he couldn't help but sigh. I used to be so confident in my abilities, thinking my sister didn't need to marry up. When a girl marries into a high-level family, she inevitably has to consider her in-laws' feelings. But I never thought it would come to this, that I'd have to ask you to reach for someone above our station. I stared at the photo on my phone for a long time before asking in surprise, "Isn't his surname Burton? How did he become the Ford family's young master?" "He's the child the Ford family has been secretly raising in country H. Fortunately, he's received the same education as ordinary people in our country." Tanya, Do you know him? I nodded and said, when I applied for an exchange program at university, I studied in country H for 2 years. That's when I met him. My brother immediately sent me his WhatsApp contact. I tried to search and add him, but was surprised to find that he had never changed his account. He had been quietly lying in my friends list all along. David, I don't understand much about business matters. You go ahead and negotiate, I smiled. We had some interactions when we were studying. Later, I returned home, and it seems his family had some issues. Things were a bit chaotic. Thinking about it now, it could be considered a kind of fate. My brother stood up, preparing to leave. But when he reached the door, he stopped and turned back to advise. Tanya, if you feel it's not suitable, just let it go. Worst case, I'll give up the country H market. I smiled, telling my brother not to worry. But I could see that he wasn't reassured at all. What I didn't expect was that although Dylan and I had completely fallen out, I hadn't blocked him on WhatsApp yet, even though I had blocked his number. He sent me another message. Tanya, now that you know the whole story, you should be more understanding. I had no choice. You've been in love with me for 3 years and want to marry me. So you should consider my feelings. What's wrong with you making a small sacrifice? Your brother David is restructuring his assets and desperately needs to enter the country H market. If you back out of the marriage now, he will suffer heavy losses. Think about it, if he loses the entire country H market, what kind of consequences will your Lawrence family face? These words, while seemingly conciliatory, were laced with a strong sense of threat. Just like when Ms. Lynch had threatened me about not having roots in country H. I didn't reply to him, instead blocking him directly. Just as I blocked Dylan, Lucas Ford sent me a message. It was a long string of cheeky emojis. Is that you? He was still using my nickname from our university days. My old man is forcing me to go on blind dates, and I was fuming about it. But when I came out, I found out the blind date was with you? I heard you're quite the fighter now. You'll have to look out for me in the future. I'm not good at fighting, I'm only good at eating. He made me laugh, and I sent a smiley face emoji back. It seems my fame from the pub incident a few days ago had spread. Want to hang out? I'll drive over and pick you up, Lucas sent another message. My cousin is also in the area. Tomorrow's the Harvest Festival, why don't we start by bankrupting that Booth family? Consider it my gesture of goodwill to my future brother-in-law? The Booth family? Jack Booth? Isn't that the sleazy man who threatened to assault me? To expedite his bankruptcy, I replied promptly. All right, come pick me up. I'll go change my clothes now. My brother and the Ford family reached an agreement at lightning speed. Meanwhile, Lucas and I started appearing together in public. Ms. Lynch had initially planned to put on airs and give me a hard time. After all, as my brother said, if we couldn't find a new business partner quickly, it would mean he'd have to give up the entire domestic market, and our Lawrence family would suffer heavy losses as a result. From Ms. Lynch's perspective, no family would sacrifice the prosperity and development of the entire clan for the sake of one woman. So, she was convinced that our family would eventually have to bow to them, and that I would ultimately be at their mercy. As for what happened in the pub, in their eyes, as long as no one died and no unsolvable criminal cases were caused, it wasn't a big deal. Unfortunately for them, things developed completely beyond their expectations. Especially the bankruptcy of the Booth family, which created a huge crack in their previously unbreakable little interest group. In less than 2 months, the Lynch family's business empire was teetering on the brink of collapse. While Lucas and I were in France customizing our wedding dress and selecting jewelry, we heard some news. On a rainy night, Ashley Hood got drunk at a pub and was picked up by some people after she left. Then, a few thugs took her to an abandoned factory on the outskirts and brutally assaulted her. Due to her habitually wild behavior and frequent absences from home, everyone initially thought she was just out partying again, and no one thought to call the police. By the time she was found, she had been locked in that abandoned factory for over 20 days. She was abused and tortured by those thugs every day. During that time, because she tried to escape, the thugs broke both her legs. When the police rescued her, her body was covered in wounds. with some parts even starting to rot, a horrific sight to behold. The most outrageous part was that none of the offending thugs were even 18 years old. When the police came to take her statement, Ashley's teeth had been mostly knocked out, and her mouth was full of various rotten sores. But she still tried to bite and scratch wildly, cursing me, Dylan, and everyone else. The police followed the clues and finally found the real culprit behind it all. It was Ms. Lynch who had instructed people to do it. When Ms. Lynch was arrested, she gritted her teeth and cursed. "That troublemaker! Years ago, she caused the death of a perfectly good girl. Now, she's ruined my grandson's marriage alliance. And even tried to have innocent girls gang raped. I was just giving her a taste of her own medicine." When the police were about to formally arrest Ms. Lynch, she chose to take her own life at home. With Ms. Lynch's death, the already shaky Lynch family business quickly headed towards bankruptcy. Following in the footsteps of the Booth family, I heard that Ashley was thrown into a mental hospital by her family, where she suffers daily beatings and torture from the staff. She soils herself, and her body is rotting more and more severely. I chose a beautiful sunny afternoon to visit her at the mental hospital. Even though she had fallen to such a miserable state, she still hadn't reflected on any of her actions. Although she could barely move, she still pointed at me with all her might, screaming and cursing. "Tanya Lawrence, you think you've won?" She cursed with all sorts of profanities. I could understand and some I couldn't. I still couldn't understand why she did what she did. But seeing her current state, I seemed to suddenly understand. She simply couldn't stand seeing anyone better off than her. She just wanted to wantonly destroy other people's happiness. 10 years ago, she was jealous of Lucy. 10 years later, she was jealous of me. I looked at her silently for a long time before slowly saying, "Ashley, no matter how jealous you are, no matter how much you act out, it's all in vain. I will eventually live a very happy life, while you will slowly rot and die in this filthy place. Your misfortune is, in fact, all caused by your own malice. You deserve this. You truly don't deserve to be human." Dylan was indicted on multiple charges including malicious bankruptcy, and was eventually sentenced to 7 years in prison. He kept making a fuss in there, saying he wanted to see me one last time. I agreed. Separated by the cold iron bars, I sat down in the visitor's chair and picked up the phone. His eyes were lifeless, his appearance haggard, no longer the spirited man he once was. In his miserable state, there was even a hint of suicidal intent. "Tanya, why? Why are you so heartless? If only you had been willing to bow your head and apologize back then, everything would have been fine." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at his words. I said, "Dylan, you've been making such a fuss about seeing me, and you still haven't realized your mistakes. 10 years ago, when Ashley bullied Lucy, I don't believe you knew nothing about it. You didn't stop it, you chose to join them. You also participated in the rape of that girl. In the end, you all drove a perfectly good girl to her death. Not only did you not feel an ounce of remorse, but you became even worse. You selfishly believed that as long as you had money and power, you could do whatever you wanted. Even when you made a huge mistake, you always expected others to give in a little, to be understanding, to sacrifice a little, to take the initiative to apologize. As if that would make everything okay. But where in this world are things so easy? You reap what you sow. You and Ashley ending up like this is karma. From now on, don't make a fuss about seeing me again. If you really want to die, then go ahead and die. After all, you owe that girl a life, and sooner or later, you'll have to pay it back." I hung up the phone, stood up and left, finally ending this ill-fated relationship. Outside, Lucas was leaning against the car waiting for me. He said he wanted to take me to see a grand flower show. From now on, my world would surely be as beautiful as a garden in full bloom.